All right. So, who needs more time to find the reading? Anyone? Sorry. Anybody? No? We all good? We're all well, I mean, even if you don't have the reading in front of you, we're gonna go through it together. So maybe you could still keep up somehow. All right. So anyway, in the little chat room, Frank Junto writes, you should look at Jim Jeffries. Yeah, he's another famous comedian. He had a comedic bit, where he explains how a comedian's joke can be blown out of proportion. Reading a bit versus hearing a bit makes a big difference, is called Jim Jeffries' Bill Cosby. And that's a good point, one of the great tools that comedians use, of course, is the delivery of how they say a joke. And obviously that has an impact on it. But anyway, the very first paragraph, Catherine Layton says, laughing it off, says, I was dating a guy and we were going to sleep together, and he said he wasn't a condom guy. Who isn't a condom guy? Last autumn, I sat in a Toronto comedy club and watched my good friend, comedian Alexandra Howell, perform a joke about being sexually assaulted. Um, Layton actually does something here that's worth noting when it comes to your particular essays, right? You know, that opening paragraph pretty much explains partially of what her essay is going to be about. Not entirely, but when it comes to your essays, in that first paragraph, you should really not just explain to me what your essay is going to be about, but it should also explain to me the certain position that you have. Like, what is your argument? What is your thesis going to be? And then you use the rest of the essay to um, build the argument, to build the thesis. But anyway, she, instantly gets the reader's attention here by stating that she watched this comedian say a joke about being sexually assaulted. And, at first, I think we could all agree that sexual assault is typically something we shouldn't be joking about, right? But, maybe the context matters, right? Um, in the next paragraph, Layton says, anyway, this is the whole joke. Anyway, I really didn't know him that well, and I definitely wasn't willing to sleep with him without a condom, but he was really fucked up that night. He was an alcoholic and a drug addict. And at some point during the night, he entered me without a condom on, even though I had clearly said I didn't want that. I pushed him off and he didn't fight me. He just rolled over. Howell's audience was uncomfortable at this point, but starting to laugh, mostly because of Howell's delivery. So maybe if you say the joke a certain way, that obviously has an impact, right, on the audience. I didn't feel attacked. I was more pissed off than anything, but I didn't kick him out of the house. In fact, I went on a date with him again. And thinking back on this, I asked myself, how much am I willing to put up with for the sake of a warm body next to me? I guess I'm willing to put up with just a dash of rape. Uh, so, I mean, again, rape in any context isn't funny, but, the specific words dash of rape certainly makes it seem a little lighter, right, than it actually is. And I don't know, maybe, I mean, is this actually rape? That's up for you to decide. But still, the specific wording and the delivery itself obviously has an impact. And also maybe the fact that she is a woman saying it too, right? But let's keep going. I confess my guilt to Howell afterwards. Why now, anyone here, why would Leighton feel any guilt, right? Why do you think Leighton felt guilty here? Anyone. You just say it or come up with what you think.
Probably because her friend was violated in her eyes.
Yeah, but why, like she feels sorry for her, but why feel guilt, right? That's a different emotion. Because she found, yes, Destin, right, because she found it funny. She felt guilty because she found the joke funny, right? Um, and so she almost feels like she is making light of something that was potentially serious through her laughter, was almost suggesting that it really wasn't like a big deal. And then she realized, oh, maybe I shouldn't have laughed because this is actually a big deal. And so therefore the next emotion is guilt. But in the very next sentence, Howell says, but I gave you permission to laugh, right? So what does she mean by that? I gave you permission to laugh. Come on, guys.
By telling the joke, she lets people, like, since she's the one telling the joke, people are allowed to laugh. She's giving them permission because she told it.
Right, because she told it within the context of a joke. She is permitting laughter as opposed to sadness, right? If she didn't say it within the context of a joke, then the appropriate response would be sorrow or sadness, right? But because it's a joke, she is not just encouraging the audience to laugh, but she's saying that it's okay here to laugh, right? Yeah, permitting the audience to laugh at a potentially traumatizing event, which again, maybe from a guy's point of view, oh, that's nothing. That's not rape. That's just a misunderstanding or whatever. But, you know, from Leighton's eyes and from Howell's eyes, this was, as Lowell says, a smudge of rape, right? Like maybe it wasn't full on rape, but it was like a little rapish. Okay, anyway. Um, when Howell told, I'm skipping to the next paragraph. I'm not going to read every single line of this because it's 11 pages, but and typically in a normal class, I would point to somebody to read, but it's a different situation. Anyway, when Howell told me this, I couldn't help but wonder how desensitized to sexual assault we have become. Are we desensitized to sexual assaults? That's actually a very interesting question.
I'm sorry, what does that word even mean?
Desensitized?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't affect us. Like we see it happen, and then a minute later we just go on with our lives. Right. That's what it means in a nutshell. Are we desensitized to sexual assault? I don't know. I mean, because that is an interesting point. I mean, interesting observation to make. Let me give you an example. Remember that show called Game of Thrones? Who's familiar with it?
Yes, I remember it.
Yeah,
I've
I mean,
seen it.
I'm sure most of you have seen it or at the very least heard about it, right? And it used to be good, but it had one terrible final season. But I mean, I could rant about the last season of Game of Thrones, but the point is, in the show, there would be a lot of death, you know, a lot of murder, a lot of people getting killed and very gory and stuff like that. But they never, from what I could recall, it never showed full on rape, like, you know, actually like somebody in the moment being raped, but it would imply that either somebody's about to be raped or was raped, right? And as me personally, I don't know if this is your experience, you know, maybe rape is just something that is desensitizing to you. But from my own experience, you know, whenever I would see somebody's head cut off on Game of Thrones, it wasn't that big of a deal to me. Like, okay, that guy's head got cut off. Wow. You know, but if a woman was like, you know, she was raped or you know, she's about to get raped, for some reason that affected me differently, right? It just had a different impact on me where it's, again, I'd rather see somebody's head get cut off on TV a million times. But if I saw somebody even about to be raped, that, like, you know, I would almost say to myself, like, I know rape happens in real life, but why do I have to see it on TV? You know, like, why did I have to see that? Yeah. So,
I understand where you're coming from because those scenes do make me cringe. I usually either fast forward when I know what's about to happen. Like, it's just something I don't want to see. It just makes me uncomfortable. And I try to tell myself, okay, they're acting, but still, like,
right. It's not
it's just
real.
something I don't want to watch.
Right, right. But what is your response to, you know, decapitation or you know, I don't want to disturb anyone here, but you know, there was even one shot of somebody's head get like smashed in. Like, what was your response to those particular scenes?
Oh, I'm all for that. I'm all for the blood and everything. But
Right.
that whole R word, I can't watch it. Nope, I can't.
The R word, right? Yeah, that word is so powerful that you can't even, you in particular, you can't even say it, right? You know, that, and it's just like, not that I'm necessarily disagreeing with Leighton here, because I think that she is right to say that we are certainly more desensitized to sexual assault today than maybe ever before in history. But I still do believe that we'd rather see someone die on TV or hope somebody dies while watching a movie than somebody be raped. Like, I've never heard anyone say, oh, I hope Darth Vader gets raped. Like, no. But Darth Vader getting killed, yeah, okay. You know, he's the bad guy. He should get killed, you know. Meanwhile, and maybe I'm going on a little bit of a different tangent here, but I think it's something to think about. Of all the crimes that a human could commit, I would think that murder is the highest on the worst thing a human could possibly do scale. And then right below that is rape, right?
It's 1:30.
Meanwhile, we are completely, it's really the opposite. At least when we see dramatic depictions of it. Right. And also, you know, even within the context of what we're talking about here, which is humor, you know, there's about, I don't know, probably a million dead baby jokes, for example, right? And you're talking about death to a baby, but I don't know too many rape jokes personally. I mean, they obviously exist, but we're obviously a lot more comfortable talking about death than rape, you know, which that is a whole different, it's partially a different topic, right? But it's something to think about, is why are we so desensitized to murder, but rape still affects us, right? But anyway, before I keep
Could
going,
it,
oh,
sorry,
okay. Yeah,
could
no,
it have,
sure, go ahead.
could it have something to do with the fact that someone who dies, they don't really have like reflective emotions on the situation
Hmm.
because they're dead?
Yeah, sure, sure.
I
But
mean, long term, somebody who's raped is going to carry that for the rest of their lives.
yeah, that's true. That's true. The pain lasts longer, right? Pain lasts longer. Um, so yeah, that could be it. That could be it. Um, but still to,
I think Frank wrote something in the chat.
yes, he did, and I'll and it and I'll get to it in a second. Um, it yeah, I mean, rape definitely has a more emotional effect on the victim because they're alive, you know, so they got to live with this. But when you're dead, you're dead, you know. So I don't know, would you rather live with pain or be dead? It's a philosophical question. Anyway, let's see what Frank says. I think it has to do with the boy who cried wolf theory. Okay. There have been a ton of allegations, and some of them were false. People have heard about it. Oh, okay. And some of them were false. People have heard about it so often, we eventually become numb. Similar to how soldiers at the start of a war will be scared of death, but later in the war never face when they see a dead body. So I think this might be a commentary on why we are desensitized, perhaps to sexual assault. At least that's how I'm reading this comment. Um, and that's actually a good point. Um, I mean, one of the positives of, let's say, the Me Too movement is that it has brought um, sexual assault to the surface, right? You know, that's definitely the positive of the Me Too movement, is that, okay, now this is something we're talking about. We get, you know, okay, we're not putting this under the rug. You know, this is a problem. It happens, and it happens quite a bit. But now one of the problems is we talk about it so much that it almost has the opposite effect of talking about it, which is now we talk about it and it's almost like, you know, hearing another thing on the news, like it's going to be sunny tomorrow on Wednesday. Oh, and by the way, 3 women were raped. You know, I'm not saying that that's how the news typically covers that type of thing, but well, maybe it does. Depends on where you get your news from, I guess. But I think there's truth there. I think there is truth there that if we hear about something so often, yes, it does bring awareness to it, but then it becomes like white noise. You know, it's just like another thing that we're dealing with today. Okay, you know. Does anyone else have anything else to say before we keep going? Because there's actually a lot of good points in this article that I want to go through. But still, anyone else? No? You know, I mean, we've heard from Eric a lot today. We've heard from Ryan. We're hearing from Frank. You know, that's good. But I like variety. I like different voices. You know, I don't know. Maybe I'm weird like that. Well, who else? Who else has any ideas? No one? No one? No one? Okay. So, next paragraph. Or no, let's stick to the same paragraph. I couldn't help but wonder how desensitized to sexual assault we have become, to the point where a woman can find experiencing it only moderately traumatizing and an audience can laugh at it. I mean, I've never experienced sexual assault, me personally, and I'm not going to ask if anyone else here has experienced it either, but I don't,
I
I
don't
mean,
think it's, I'm sorry, I
yeah.
don't think it's desensitized. I think it's a very sensitive topic to talk about. So
Mhm.
like, for me, I haven't experienced it, but I would say that for someone who has experienced it, maybe it's just a topic that they don't really, even the news, they don't talk about somebody getting raped for long, but if someone got murdered, it'll be on the news for 3 days. You know, it's just not something that you want to continue bringing up. It's like opening a cut constantly.
Mm,
You know, it's healing, and then you go and you rip off the stab
mm,
and you're opening it. So it's not, I don't think desensitizing would be the right word. I don't know what the right word is, but I think it's just something that you wouldn't want to constantly bring up.
mm,
You know, if you're grieving, you
mm,
go and you do something to occupy yourself, you know, and you kind of set that aside.
mm,
But if you were raped or you were sexually abused or anything in that area, you wouldn't want to go back and say
mm,
and bring it back up. You know, even the news, if somebody goes and interviews someone who got raped, um, they're just going to tell you, I don't want to talk about it.
mhm,
I don't have anything to say, no comment, whatever it is. I do feel that, you know, if you're a victim of a situation like that, you should speak up.
mhm.
You know, you should make everybody aware, because
Right.
it's an issue. It's not something you should be, you know, afraid of. It's no difference than somebody getting murdered and you going to point out the murderer.
Mm, mm,
It's a criminal. Go get
right.
him.
Mm,
You know, so I don't think that would be the right word. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
mm. No, I think you make actually a very interesting point. Remind me, are you a psychology major?
I am not,
Oh, okay.
but it is one of my uh one of the classes that I like.
Yeah, because there is a psychology theory called repression theory, right? And there's a great article on the internet called Return of the Repressed. And it's the theory is how when somebody experiences something traumatic, they will try to repress the traumatic experience. They'll try to, for like not think about it or try to forget that it actually happened as a way of coping with whatever happened. But the problem with doing that is you then like subconsciously that those repressed thoughts will still seep into their everyday life and actually impact their personality and how they treat people and even how they go about day-to-day activities. And so simply repressing traumatic experiences in your head is actually not really a cure, but is actually making your own psychological state worse. And yet that's almost like a coping mechanism that the brain will do in order to uh, deal with a traumatic experience. And actually, one of the great points of this article is that the reason why a lot of these female comedians will make jokes about being raped or sexually assaulted is because they'd rather do that than repress the thoughts in their head. And so, and therefore, instead of, again, repressing the thoughts, they at least talk about it in a way that they're comfortable with. And so that's better than just, again, repressing the thoughts. Okay. But still, that is a psychological theory. And I think it's cool that you recognize that. All right. So anyway, and I've written an essay about it myself back in the day. So yeah, check out the article, Return of the Repressed. Anyway, after all, the next paragraph in Latens's article, she writes, after all, we live in a culture where two high school football, this is a good point, actually. Two football stars in Steubenville, Ohio, were found guilty of raping a teenage girl, and major news outlets responded by lamenting the loss of the young man's bright futures. Maybe Layton is slightly, exaggerating. Maybe that wasn't the focus of the news outlets, but maybe it was, right? And again, this guy raped two high school football players, raped a teenage girl. They were found guilty, and the news outlets were like, oh, but what about this guy's career? Like, oh no, or his future life, instead of allegedly talking about the girl and her psychological state, about her traumatic experience, about her life, and how that's gonna be. And there was I believe a similar situation happened, I think like 5 years ago, where there was a college swimmer, who went to jail for, I think it was for rape as well. And the judge decided to give him a not guilty sentence because he didn't want to ruin the swimmer's life. I think that's how it went. And of course, the response was, how could you?
Yes, his name was Brock Turner,
Aha,
and that was completely wrong.
completely.
I hate media. I'm sorry. I hate the news. They're disgusting. They're absolutely disgusting.
Just to clarify, what was completely wrong? The judge's decision?
Yes, the judge's decision,
Right.
and how the media portrays this guy as a victim instead of a convict. He is not the victim. You
Right.
made a conscious decision to do something. You should face the consequences that you decide to do. Don't turn it into something that he's not. He's poor you. Great. You were doing great in life. Continue down that path. You chose a different path. Face your consequences.
Yeah.
I'm
yeah.
sorry.
I mean,
I just hate
that's typically
these topics
how.
and like the media.
I'm sorry. What did you say? White people?
I said I just hate like how
yeah.
people can turn something into something wrong into something not so wrong.
Okay. I mean, the truth is, the media, for sometimes the news just reports the news sometimes, but other times they have to almost spin a certain narrative, right? And so, in the media, we have to also remember one thing about it is that it's a business and to make money. That's just what it is. And so they would spin a certain way in a certain way that could create a certain narrative that gets them as many views as possible. And so maybe they felt, oh, we got to spin it both ways, where, oh, it's a tragedy for not just the rape victim, but also the rapist. And therefore they give a different depiction, right, of what actually happened. And I'm not defending the media. I'm just saying that that's just how it goes, and unfortunately, yeah, I mean, instead of focusing on the victim, they made the perpetrator a victim in of itself. And it's so weird because in the judge's decision, he acknowledges that this person committed rape. Like it happened. Like he knows it happened. He's concerned though about this swimmer's future. So we acknowledge that he did something wrong.
And the judge wasn't worried
Yeah.
about the poor girl's future? Like, what kind of judge is this?
I don't know. And I should have done more research on it to, my defense, before bringing it up. But I mean, yeah. And, people saw it as an example of, my mind is blanking, of, him being a white, rich college athlete, doing something that if anyone else would have done, they would have been treated more harshly, right? But the point is, yeah, that's a classic example of blaming, well, not blaming the victim, but of desensitizing the rape, really. Because again, we acknowledge that this person did the crime, but we're more worried about other things than the actual act of rape, which again, you could see as ridiculous, or maybe if you're coming from a different perspective, maybe you don't. I'm not saying you should see it from a different perspective. I'm just saying, that it's almost understandable today where, yeah, I mean, maybe you can get away with rape because it is more desensitized in today's world. Maybe.
I
Right.
wonder if the judge was like a family friend or paid off or anything like that.
I don't know. I'm not willing to start speculating, Still though, either way, rape is rape. And if the judge acknowledges, yeah, this guy committed rape, but then that's a problem, right? Just the but in of itself is perhaps a problem. And that
Right.
is Layton's point here, right?
And that is why people claim that things are desensitized, because of how the judgments are made and what is said.
Right.
The girl gets raped, but he's really good at swimming. Who the fuck cares that he's really good at swimming? I don't care. The girl's family doesn't care. The only person that cares is this boy and his family. No one else cares. If you go and you murder somebody and you're sentenced, I get it. You murdered somebody. But also, you know what? I'll let you go because you deserve. No, you chose something. You
Yeah.
should get what you want. You deserve, not what you want, but what you deserve. Why is there always a but to, make society feel like certain things are okay? It is not okay. You go rob a bank, you go do something. It is not okay. Don't make certain criminal activities okay, because then that's why there are constant criminal activities, because people get away with such a light sentence. Okay, go do 3 months of like sweeping the street or whatever it is. Like, it's not something light, and people turn it into something light.
Yeah. I mean, the only counter argument that I could possibly think of is that, if let's say somebody who has a mentally sick does something, then you could say, oh, well, it's their mental disorder. And so therefore, instead of being punished, they should receive some kind of treatment. But that's the only counter argument I could possibly think of. If the judge would have said, I don't think this guy committed rape, then, perhaps there's some kind of argument there. But the fact that the judge acknowledged, yes, the rape happened, in my eyes, personally, then this guy should have went to jail. I don't care if he was the son of, I don't know, the Pope. You know, rape is rape. You go to jail. But anyway, moving on, because we could talk about this more, especially if this was a criminal justice class, or even a women's studies class or a sociology course. But there are actually a lot of other points that we should get to in Layton's essay here, article essay. I mean, this is an article because it appeared in a newspaper. But anyway, let's keep going. Okay. So the next point that Layton actually points out is that America is a country where 1 in 6 women will be a victim of rape or attempted rape in her lifetime, and only 3% of convicted rapists will ever spend a day in jail. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? And let's try to think about it, not even from a feminist perspective, but like, I mean, you could think about it from a feminist perspective. You could claim, well, there's male patriarchy, and so they're able to get away with more things. But also, let's think about, well, actually, that could be the main reason if you think about it. But still, though, why do so few rapists actually go to jail? I mean, this is suggesting that, you know, and the wording of this might actually piss off a few people, but it's, according to this statistic, it's actually true. If you want to rape somebody, there's a 97% chance you'll get away with it. That's what it's saying. And if you're a woman, you know, I'm trying to think of how many female students I have in this class, right? You know, let's say I have 12 female students. I don't know the exact number. I didn't count, but let's say I have 12 female students in this class. 1 in 6, that means 2 of you will probably be raped in your lifetime. Meanwhile, pretty much all the guys, hypothetically, if they were to go and do that, they might get away with it. I mean, so yeah.
I was just gonna answer your question. I don't know why. I'm guessing maybe because with rape, it's more of a he say, she say situation.
Mhm.
It's like, how do you really prove if somebody was raped? You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's true. That's probably the primary reason. Probably. I mean, again, if you're a feminist, you can say, well, there's the patriarchy, it exists, men have more power. So it's like my word versus a man's word. And perhaps we'll listen to the man first before the woman. But even if you don't believe that there is a patriarchy, if that doesn't exist, yeah, I mean, it's not as clear cut as murder. If someone's murdered, okay, we could put the puzzle pieces together, probably more straightforward, or at least that's what's suggested in like crime shows like CSI. Like there's always, oh, you know, there's a fingerprint, blah, 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 blah. But if a
I
rape
see
happens,
Frank's comment, and I just want to say with
Yeah.
his comment, I thought of like, you know, with those kids, if they are, I don't know if they're a thing, like I honestly don't know, but I would say it is, but if it is a thing and a woman or a man, whoever it is, gets raped, right?
mm,
They don't tend to report it right away.
yeah,
I don't know like what the numbers are. Let's just say like, you know, 7 out of 10 people don't report it. And by the time they get talked into reporting the issue, it's
mhm,
too late. You know, the medical rape kit is not going to show up.
The
Right.
And
evidence
then
is
by
gone.
that time, it's just going to be like another classmate said, like it's a
Yeah.
he said, she said thing. Because then why
Right.
didn't you report it in the beginning? Why did you wait? Because it's a mental issue. You know, you can't expect someone to be raped and then go ahead and say, and go walk into a precinct and say, hey guys, I've been raped.
Mm.
It's not an easy couple of words to come out of somebody's mouth, but it is easier for murder because it's murder. You know, you go in and you tell someone is dead or someone is injured, you can probably save them. But being raped, I think it's like a more personal thing where like if you're not in an open space where somebody's able to help you right away, only you and the rapist knows. But if it's murder, people around you or the family member might find out, hey, this my brother, sister, mother, father, whatever it is missing. Where are they? You know, but when you're raped, you can walk home and completely put up a show like nothing happened until something triggers you to speak up about a situation. But by that time, it might be like years later, months later, and that rapist gets away with a certain amount of time. If you don't speak up, that's a year of them walking around free, being able to rape somebody else. Just saying.
Yeah, I mean that's true. And in Frank's defense, he does acknowledge that yeah, there apparently, you know, these rape kits do exist, but they only last for a certain amount of time. They only work until a certain amount of time. And so therefore, okay, these kits exist, but it doesn't prove much. So, and I think Frank is raising his hand. Frank, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just real quick.
Yeah.
You know, as you said, Professor, with my comment, but the rape kits, they do exist. They're only effective for a certain amount of time, though. I'm not 100% sure on the amount of time. Even then, they're not 100% accurate.
Right.
But there's other things that detectives or investigations will come up with, autopsy reports. The bruising are there signs of forced
entry, yeah.
Forced entry, not only the person themselves, but in the home. You know, there's a lot of different factors that they look into. And I don't want to keep going into details because then this will become a major crimes course. But yeah, like Eric said, DNA and the fingernails. But even then, it's hard to distinguish. Is it force, like does someone forcefully hold someone down, or is it bondage, or is it this, or it's that? So eventually, it's always going to boil down to a he say, she say scenario.
Right. And I think that is one thing to definitely keep in mind, is that I think the reason why rape jokes are acceptable for some people is because, you know, it is hard to prove rape, right? And so therefore the jokes are almost acceptable for some people for whatever real, like it becomes easier to normalize it because, you know, we don't know if it actually happened or not. So the joke has maybe less of an impact in some people's eyes. Okay, so anyway. There are no boundaries. Okay, so the next paragraph, you know, Leighton does recap the events that led to her being inspired to write this article. And I already talked about that, so we're gonna just, you know, skim through that or skip it. And in another paragraph, I would say 1, 2, 3 paragraphs down on page 95.
It's 2 o'clock.
Page 95, Leighton writes, while male comics are quick to defend their right to tell rape jokes, they rarely have an eloquent explanation as to why, beyond there are no boundaries, in comedy or comedians should be able to joke about anything. So, I mean, I did hear a comedian named, and we actually read about him once already, Bill Burr, during his podcast, say that, you know, comedians see the comedy club as like a dojo where you practice your craft, your art. And so that's where you experiment. And so, you know, maybe a comedian will experiment with a rape joke. And so, and also, you know, we have freedom of speech in this country, and so et cetera, right? And that is, you know, one of the main counter arguments is that, well, if we just accept that it's a joke, then we at least acknowledge the context that it's a joke. It's not meant to be taken seriously. It's not meant to be taken seriously, and so it's a joke. It's not somebody trying to talk about a, you know, trying to address the issue in any serious way. So let's just accept it as it is, as a joke, right? But in the next paragraph, Leighton writes, every time a guy like Tosh or Morrell turns rape into an easy punchline, it gets harder to believe that male comics who perform or defend these kinds of jokes don't understand the pervasiveness of rape in America or the devastation it causes. Women comprise 90% of rape victims in America. We are, as a group, oppressed by rape. Now, that is to acknowledge, though, that men are, you know, they do get raped as well, but the vast majority of victims are women, right? It's rape is not just something that happens, but it's arguably a form of oppression as well. And, you know, perhaps the making light of such a terrible thing is almost making light of oppression, that oppression is not important, that oppression doesn't matter. Or even in some cases, maybe it should be encouraged, right? If we make light of it. So that is Leighton's point there. But she does acknowledge something else that might seem contradictory, because in the very next sentence she writes, but when the oppressed joke about their oppression, different rules apply. Why would different rules apply if the oppressed woman joke about how they're oppressed? Or are there different rules that apply? Anyone? Is it okay for a woman to joke about rape? Or is it still not okay?
It is not okay.
It's not okay. Why?
It is not okay because then you set a standard for society to think that, you know, if a woman starts to make a joke about something, then that they're okay with it. We're not okay with it. I'm not speaking for all. I mean, I'm speaking for all. It is not okay. You
Okay.
know, you shouldn't be joking about it. It's not a joke.
Mhm.
If you're a victim of rape and you decide to, you know, joke about it in a way where it helps you feel better, you know, I get it. But if you're not a victim, it's not a joke.
Mm.
If you're not a victim, do not joke about it. It's not a joke for you.
It's not a joke. Right. And I guess it's like the equivalent of mansplaining. right? What's mansplaining? Does anyone know what that is?
I don't know.
No. Mansplaining is when a man talks about a woman's issue as if he totally gets it. And he like will shut up another woman in the room so he can go on with this explanation, even though it's completely wrong, you know? And so if a guy jokes about, if anybody jokes about rape when they haven't been raped themselves, it's like not just inappropriate because they are in no position to talk about such a thing, but they also don't get it. You know, they just don't get it. So why the hell are you talking about it? You know, meanwhile, if a woman talks about it, she understands that in society, we have actually taught women to constantly be on guard, right? You know, women are encouraged to buy a pepper spray, for example. Women are encouraged to carry firearms and, you know, for different reasons than why a guy would carry a firearm. You know, so it's like, it's almost more okay for a woman to talk about rape because they come from an area where they understand either the anxiety of getting raped or what it feels like to be a victim of rape itself. You know, meanwhile, if a guy does the same thing, yes, men can be raped too. It does happen, but because it happens so far less often, it's almost like a man mansplaining, you know, something that they have no idea what they're talking about to you know, to a degree. And I hope that makes sense. I think it makes sense in my head. Anyway, the article goes on to say that it does, like for certain women, it does have a therapeutic effect. But there is one female comedian named what's her name? I think it's Lisa Lampanelli, who talks about rape, but she doesn't do it for any therapeutic reasons. She talks about rape because her shtick as a comedian is to shock people, right? She says a lot of racial jokes. She says a lot of you know, jokes that are meant to just simply shock people, right? And so, you know, at what point do we just accept shock humor, right? Frank Ginto writes in the comments in the chat room, a lot of people use humor as a coping mechanism, which is true. Yeah, you know, sometimes we might trip walking up the stairs and we laugh about it instead of cry about it. It's one of the theories of humor we actually talked about, and it's the brain trying to make light of our folly. For example, a friend of mine has parents who went through a nasty divorce, and he will make jokes about divorce or family splitting up. It makes him feel better and helps him function. To others who have not been through that situation, it may seem awkward, but in the same token, people in that situation may not want to feel separated from everyone else. So the joke almost acts as like a way of, I know I went through something different than you. You may not get it entirely, but let me educate you on it a little bit to bring us more together. And I'm going to use humor as that catalyst to bring us together. That is actually a good example of of why certain women who have been victims of rape or have been in situations where they think, oh, I have to stay on guard because, you know, I don't want to be raped today. They could relate to. And so, you know, they want to tell a joke from their own life experience and bring people in on the joke somehow. So I could see where there it is appropriate to tell a rape joke. It is appropriate to tell a rape joke. But what Lisa Lampanelli does, you know, I am on the fence about, and I would not appreciate her rape jokes, because even though, yes, she is a woman, so maybe it's better than a guy telling a rape joke. Still, though, she's doing it not for any coping mechanism at all. She's doing it to get laughs. And that's where the problem is, because, you know, if you generate laughter at something so traumatizing, perhaps one of the end results will be is that we take the subject matter lightly and it becomes something else than what it actually is. Okay, I could keep going. And I also wanted to look at some of your comments on the discussion board. I would like to see more people participate in discussion boards, and I shouldn't have to remind people to participate in discussion boards. It should just be, you know, routine at this point. You know, Monday, is there a question on the discussion board? Yes or no? If there is, I answer it at some point during the week. If there isn't, okay, I move on with my life. I do something else. But, you know, I do want to look at a couple of essays, because, you know, I see some things in these essays that a lot of students do. So I think it's important to address it now rather than just address it on each individual essay. So I am going to share.
Are you going to point out some examples of summarizing? Because that's something that I feel like I'm probably doing, so I want to not do that.
Yes. Yes, I will. And again, summary to a certain degree is okay. It's necessary. In fact, you probably should do it in some cases, but the whole essay can't be just one summary, you know, because then what's the point? You know, it's not your, you know, writing an essay is like partially, unless I tell you specifically, I want a full on research essay where you just tell me a bunch of information, then that's different. But the purpose of these essays is for you to generate your own ideas, right? But, you know, if part of your essay has to do with the surprise theory of humor or the ambivalence theory of humor, then perhaps summary is necessary. Perhaps. Again, it depends on the context of whatever that, you know, specific point is you are trying to make. So anyway, I'll address it. Okay, so this is an example of a student's essay. You know, I mean, the person's last name, I didn't realize this, but is on the top anyway. But still, I changed their name for, and yeah, their last name is actually there, but still, let's pretend the student's name is John Doe, right? John Doe. First things first, his format. How does it look, right? Format matters. He does mostly everything right. Actually, one thing I didn't point out that I should have is that when you refer to the professor, typically you would write Professor Bartoloni or Instructor Bartoloni. If your professor is very proud that they have a doctorate degree, maybe you write Dr. Bartoloni, but at the end of the day, yeah, you shouldn't just refer to me as Stefano Bartoloni. Not that I really care, I really don't, but still, professor, right? Professor, because that's what I am to you. Yep, the class is there, the dates. Okay. The rhetoric of humor, Freud. No bold, right? And I make that point here, no bold. So the title shouldn't be bolded, but the title is good. I mean, it's acceptable. It's better than like essay one, right? I don't like essay one. And also, like a mistake a lot of students will do, they'll put a lot of space in between the title and the little header as a way of adding a few more lines to their essay. No, it should be just one line, one space, one line. Times New Roman 12 fonts, Okay. All right, first paragraph. Sigmund Freud was one of the great neurologists to have ever lived. This is another thing I should have pointed out, but I overlooked it. He tries, well, if we're going to be talking about a specific article that Sigmund Freud wrote, you would write it in present tense, right? For the most part, your whole essay should be in present tense. But here, yeah, okay, maybe he's just talking about Sigmund Freud in general. So, okay, actually, he tried to understand humor in a way that we are only beginning to understand ourselves. He spoke of dark humor as though it was a method of being rebellious. I would use this as an opportunity to actually discuss, well, what are some specific things he said about dark humor? What is his, like, okay, it's a method of being rebellious, but how? How is it rebellious, according to Sigmund Freud? And then the student writes, this paper will aim to understand whether dark humor is a form of rebellion. That's not a thesis statement. That's like you're almost unsure yourself. This is an opportunity for you to tell the reader, dark humor is a form of rebellion. Because, and you say why? Because dark humor goes against social acceptance. Something like that. Next paragraph. Dark humor is a style of comical expression or saying. This little or saying, this is an example of when you read it out, like after you write it, you should read it out loud to see if it makes sense. Because as a reader, and I think I know what he's trying to say here, but me as a reader, I was a little confused, like saying what? What are you saying? Or what do you mean by the word saying? So I would reword this in a way of saying dark humor is a style of comedy that makes light of a subject that is considered unspeakable in society. Actually, most of his sentence is actually pretty good. He just maybe uses too many words here. We call it being too wordy, right? Sometimes less is more when you're trying to prove a certain point. I mean, usually being specific and adding detail is good. But if you read it out loud and it sounds weird, then it probably is. So you have to take out certain words, replace certain words, rearrange the sentence, etc. Okay. It is used by comedians to tackle specific topics that most would rather not talk about. But since most comics are considered performers, they will use the platform. Oh, okay. I am starting to remember why I don't like this sentence the first time I read it. But I'm going to keep reading it for a particular purpose, and hopefully you'll pick up on why. Well, it actually does say it in my little comments here, but let me read it for the sake of argument. All right, it is used by comedians to tackle serious topics that most would rather not talk about, but since most comics are considered performers, they will use that platform to create jokes for the sake of making jokes, allowing the crowd to be carried away into their thinking, letting their guard down and laughing at the joke because one, they can relate, and two, the joke about a taboo is even funnier as the human mind has an ability to laugh at the unlaughable, awkward moments. All right, I'm exhausted. I need a drink of water after reading that. And my brain is exhausted from just reading that sentence. That is an example of a run-on sentence, right? It's because it's running on and it looks like it's a train that's off its tracks. And so, and this sentence probably makes a lot of sense to the person who wrote it. And yeah, I mean, I get what they're saying, but it still doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's still not very clear. You know, what's the point? You know, so if it makes sense in your head, well, I mean, that's good, but it may not make sense to reader. So therefore, you have to go back and you have to read it, and then you have to say to yourself, would somebody else who's reading this get what I'm saying? So the way to fix this is to reword it if you have to, which they do in this case. Put commas when there's a natural pause. Like, so for an example, for the sake of making jokes, allowing the crowd to be carried away, jokes. Here, I would put a comma right there. For the sake of making jokes, pause, allowing the crowd to be carried away in their thinking. Next
I
sentence.
have a question.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
So for this run-on sentence, because I'm really bad with this type of punctuation, this semicolon, would that fit anywhere in this run-on sentence or no?
It might. Usually when I use a semicolon, it would be along the lines of like yeah, you could use along the lines of like clarifying something you just said, if that makes any sense. But let's keep breaking down this particular sentence, this particular example. All right. But since most comics are considered performers, they will use that platform to create jokes for the sake of making jokes. This is also a little bit of repetitious, right? You know, when you repeat the same word over and over again in the same sentence, it you know, typically just doesn't sound good, you know. So try to say something else to avoid that repetition. Performers will use that platform to create jokes for the sake of creating laughter, right? For the sake, we'll use that platform to generate laughter. Laughter. And yeah, you know what? I think here is a good opportunity for that semicolon. Semicolon, allowing the crowd to be carried away in their thinking. I'm debating what word, because I'm not sure if I even like the word, this particular phrasing. To be carried away in their to generate laughter so the audience is permitted to laugh as well. I don't know. I'm debating what I would use here. But you get the point, right? To be, sometimes you just have to play around with words to see what fits. To laugh at, to laugh at this serious subject. This causes the audience to let their guard down. Let their guard down. I'm going to reread the whole sentence, okay? Because I'm not even liking what I'm using here. It is used by comedians to tackle serious topics that most what, right? Most what? Be specific. Most people, right? Most people would rather not talk about. Most people would rather not talk about. However, due to the performance nature, however, spelled wrong, okay. However, due to the performance nature most people would rather not talk about. However, the joke creates an opportunity to create laughter.
It's 2:30.
Okay, so I just rearranged half of this sentence. It is used by comedians to tackle serious topics that most people would rather not talk about. Would rather not talk about. You know what? Okay. The performance nature ah, nature of the joke however generates laughter, allowing the crowd to feel more comfortable with a serious subject. Now, of course, dark humor. Okay, so I'm gonna reread the whole sentence again, because even I had to like figure out in my brain how to put this together. It is used by comedians to tackle serious topics that most people, again, would rather not talk about. The performance nature of the joke, however, generates laughter, allowing the crowd to feel more comfortable with a serious subject. So what I did was I put punctuation, I eliminated a lot of words, I rearranged a bunch of words, and this is probably something I should have done before this class, but you saw me in real time trying to figure out the best way to talk about this, and it was a pain in the butt, but I did it. And perhaps if I spend more time on this sentence, I could probably make it sound even better. But the point is, sometimes you have to reread out loud and just play around with words so you figure out a clear way to say whatever it is you're trying to say. Okay, so we actually have more clarification when it comes to semicolons. All right, semicolons are most commonly used where periods would go, and they are put between sentences to allow a strong relationship between sentences. They are also used to separate items in a list that have eternal punctuation. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that is basically what I was trying to say. They're there to connect certain sentences, but a lot of the times, if you think something is better off being said in two separate sentences, then most of the time I would even say, well, then maybe they should be two separate sentences. Two sentences are usually two ideas. There are times where maybe they should be together. But 99% of the time, if they're better off separate, then that's what you do. Okay. All right. And there's more to this sentence, but for the sake of not spending too much time on one paragraph, we're gonna move on a little bit. Daniel Tosh is an American comedian who uses one of the comedians who embrace dark humor. Now, yeah, here is again where you want to use a comma. Daniel Tosh, comma, an American comedian, comma, is an example. is an example of a comedian who embraces dark humor as part of his performances, right? Because you're not just talking about one particular performance or one particular set, but you're talking about how he typically is, who embraces dark humor as part of his performances. So again, just another example of reading out loud and trying to use what words best fit what you're trying to say. The crowd comes to a show expecting a performance like this every time. And he often delivers just that. Okay. Here he talks about, if we analyze the manner in which he delivers his jokes, we can see how he follows the principles of Freud. Now, again, this student doesn't talk about specifically the principles of Freud. He references certain principles, but he doesn't really talk about any principles specifically. And I think it would be a great idea if you were to talk about, okay, here's a principle of Freud. This is how Daniel Tosh uses that particular principle. That way, I understand the point more. Now he is quoting Freud here, but I don't see a page or paragraph number in this parentheses. There should be one. If this is, let's say, if he is citing from a specific something that Freud specifically says, then he should list something there besides Freud's last name in the parentheses. If it's an essay and it's on page 12, then you list 12. If an internet article that doesn't have page numbers, then you would list the paragraph number. But still, that is a citation little mistake right there. And therefore, he should list something besides just the author's last name. Okay, and there are a few other little grammatical mistakes. According to Freud, comma. I mean, these little comma mistakes are the most common grammatical mistakes. Okay, Freud's theories. Right, and again, he refers to, usually instead of referring to the author's last name, I would refer to, first name, right? I would use either their last name or their full name. So yeah, Sigmund Freud will forever be echoed in history rather than just Sigmund. Sigmund, like if you refer to their first name, it almost seems like informal, like as if he's your buddy, but he's not your buddy. So therefore you should be more formal when you're writing. But anyway, those are a few little mistakes that I see from people. Also the unnecessary capitalization of certain words. You don't have to capitalize entire words. And I also see a repetition of no here. And I know there students trying to make a point about sexual about rape, and no means no. But still, try to reword certain sentences in a way where you're not constantly repeating, the same word over and over again. One thing I should also note, yes, last name, page number, good format, right? Should be at the top of your page, last name, page number. A lot of people forget to do that. And it's really easy, there's no excuse not to do it. By the way, one thing I should also note is that when I'm reviewing your essays, I don't literally list grammatical mistakes on every single page. I will do it for the first 2 to 3 pages, but I won't do it for every single page, because typically grammatical mistakes that you make at the start of the essay, chances are you're going to be making the same ones throughout. And so I expect you to read your essays to yourself and correct those mistakes as much as you could possibly do so on your own, rather than relying on me. Again, a good rule of thumb, ask someone else to read your essay to point out all the grammatical mistakes if you can't find them all yourself. And of course, read it out loud to yourself. Yeah, Isabella writes, I suggest someone else reading it, because for me, when I read my own writing, I think it's perfect. That does tend to happen. But again, if you read it out loud, that might have a different effect. If you read it to yourself, yeah, your mind might automatically correct all the mistakes there. But if you read it out loud, you're forcing yourself to read the mistakes. So, but again, if you want to do both, if you want to read it out loud and have someone else read it, that's fine too. It's better to correct the mistakes before I read it, even though it's fine. Still though, this is part of the writing process, right? Also, going back to this particular sentence, the student does end the paragraph with a quote. Typically, I wouldn't end a paragraph with a quote, because the last sentence of every paragraph could almost summarize that entire paragraph, or explain the point that you're trying to make in that paragraph, right? So, you typically don't start a paragraph with a quote, and you typically don't end a paragraph with a quote. Sometimes, again, depending on the paragraph and the point you're trying to make in it, it might be okay, but typically it's not. Now we keep going, scroll. Last paragraph, last page is the works cited page. Typically, I would want the URLs to, yeah, actually, it's acceptable. I would accept this as a fine works cited page. Maybe here he's missing if it's a book, like if it's a literal actual book, you would write print, you know, if it's a PDF, then that has a different format. If he found this online, then it has its own format. If it's a book, you would write print at the end. You would also write where it was published, and not just a publisher, but literally where it was published. But all in all, as a first attempt at a works cited page, this is actually pretty decent. Also 2019 over here, you would add that double space, that extra space, because technically speaking, it's like a new sentence. But this is a good works cited page for the most part. There are some mistakes here and there, but this is a lot better than some other works cited pages that I've come across. Yeah, he is double spacing the second lines. I mean, if you could fit the URL here on the same line, then do so. Also, there's no blue here either, right? Like some students, you would still see the blue hyperlink. You would have to remove that, the hyperlinks. Okay, anyway. Oh, wow. We are going a little bit longer than we usually do, but that's fine. That's fine. Let's look at one more essay real quick, and then we'll start wrapping things up. Where is it? Okay, right here. So essay 1, draft 1. Yeah, I don't like that as a title. Okay, you should try to think of an original title. And then first sentence, after reading Krotowski's article, comma, what effect has the internet had on comedy? There are a couple of things to be noted about how the internet affects our society, and most importantly, the comedic factor of it. Again, I don't think you put a capital in the word internet unless it's starting a sentence. Also, there should be a comma after the word article here. Also you put a comma inside the quotes. So like that. And most importantly, again, you're hearing that natural pause. So you put, and most importantly, the comedic factor of it, right? Okay, let's see. Now, you know what? Also, one thing, no last name or page number, right? That's just not the right format. No last name and page number. This paragraph here is not indented. Also, one thing that this student doesn't do, like they refer to TikTok as like an example of people, using the internet to tell comedy in a quick, fast way. But I like if you describe specific examples, right? So I, as a reader, me personally, let's say I've never used TikTok before. If you describe a specific example, maybe then I could get it. I could understand it. There is no indent in this paragraph. And there is also no works cited page, and that's a boo-boo. The next draft of your essay, right? If there's no works cited page, then I'm not even going to read it. I'm just going to be like, you're missing your works cited page. I want it. Get it to me. Okay. Now, before we wrap up, one of the students talked about an example of avoiding summary, right? So let me try to address that real quick. Oh, wait, this is, oh, wait. Where is it? All right. Wait, no. Yeah, this is the right person. Okay. Leon Rappaport. No, okay, I'm going to start from the top. Humor is a quality by which someone may be perceived as comic or amusing as expressed in literature or someone's speech. Leon Rappaport says one size does not fit all in coming up with humor theories to account for why people laugh. Rappaport came up with 6 theories on what makes people laugh. Now, he did not come up with 6 theories. He did not originally come up with these theories. Other people did. Rappaport just talks about them, but I digress. The superiority theory of humor explains humor as a feeling that someone gets when you see the person they do not get along with fail or fall. It is enjoyable. It is an enjoyable feeling of superiority to the object of amusement. Now, she does not cite Rappaport correctly here. If you look at this little comment I wrote, that's how it should look. Oh, wait, what's happening? Okay. Should look. The period comes after the citation, right? It comes after the citation, and there's no comma after Rappaport. It's just Rappaport page number, just like that. You don't have to add a comma. For some reason, every semester there is at least one student who feels like they should put a comma there. You don't have to. You don't have to. And then for some reason, she begins the next section and just says talks. Talks what? I think that's just a little, little typo, but, she should say Rappaport talks or discusses the release and relief theory. Anyway, in this first paragraph, she's literally just listing some of the theories of humor that Rappaport discusses. Meanwhile, I have no idea what her essay is about. I have no idea what's going on. She's just listing a bunch of things that Rappaport says. This is an example of summary. And I don't know what purpose is solving. I don't know why is she summarizing? And for the majority of the essay, she continues to, summarize other things that Rappaport said. Again, some summary is good, but it has to have a purpose. It has to be part of maybe you explain, again, in the other essay that we read by the student talking about Freud, he could explain more specifically some of the things that Freud says as a way for me, the reader, to know this, to know, oh, so that is what Freud says. Okay, so now I understand, now I get it. And therefore, now I understand your overall point even more, And I said to the student in the little comments here, that it is a fairly interesting essay. And in the last 2 paragraphs, you do start to see little peaks of sunlight where she is starting to talk about her own understanding, her own opinions, her own theories. but most of the essay appears to summarize various theories of humor. Having some brief theories of Rappaport's topics is probably necessary, but it should not take the majority of the essay. Instead, try to focus on a theory or a couple theories that you tend to agree with and focus more on those particular theories. You can even discuss a real life example that illustrates why you agree, why you think that that theory has merits, why you agree with that theory, and just dive into that more. You know, for example, in Catherine Layton's article that we just read, she talks about her own personal experiences as a way of proving the bigger point that she's trying to make. So you can do that. All right, it's 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock. We've gone on for a long time. So now we've worked for, we've earned spring break a little bit. All right, and I have a cup of water. Anyway, before we wrap things up, does anyone have any questions for me? Anyone?
So spring break is starting, right? So we don't have class next week and the following week, right?
We don't have class for next week. So next week, Saturday, we're not doing this. We're not doing this. I don't plan on having it. You can sleep in even longer. But I still want you got on, I think, yeah, the 27th, today's the 20th. So the 27th, in a week from today, I want to have people try to at least write, well, you know what? 28th, Sunday, before 11:59 p.m. on Sunday. That's when I would like to see the next draft of your essay. And again, I will get to everybody's first draft. Again, only 12 people only submitted a first draft though. So if you haven't submitted your draft, please do so I could help you out. And that second draft, that will be graded. You will get a grade for it. So try your best. Try your best. If you have any questions during the week, let me know. And I also recommend that if, let's say, I haven't gotten to your essay yet, I would still work on that second draft, you know, and then when you do get my comments, that's when you know, improve the essay accordingly. So in other words, you work on your essay, right? You know, continue to improve it, and then you get my comments, and then you continue to improve your essay based on those comments, you know. But either way, if you haven't given me a draft yet, get it in, you know, get it in, submit it to me. You know, and
It's 3 o'clock.
yeah. So next week, no class, but I still will like the second draft of your essay. I'm going to post a link on Blackboard where you submit that essay. You will get a grade, but you know, if the grade isn't a grade that you like particularly, don't panic, don't worry about it. Just try to look for ways to improve, you know, because at the end of the day, I care mostly about improvements rather than you just fulfilling certain requirements. Any other questions?
So wait a minute, do we have class on the 3rd?
3rd is what day?
That's Saturday, the week after next.
Let me
I
look.
just want to be sure because the school
Yeah.
calendar says that spring break goes through till the 4th, but
Huh?
I've had instances where like classes will be held and I'll miss them by accident. So I just want to be super careful.
Yeah, sure. Let me double check on my little syllabus. Uh,
Can someone tell me what day spring break starts?
It says March 27th to April 4th on the school calendar.
Do
Okay,
I still
so
have, okay, thank you.
spring break. So and that's my I have my syllabus up. Now I'm pulling up my calendar. Okay, so spring break. When does it start again?
March 27th, it
Uh-huh.
says.
Right. So right. So I think this does go on for two weeks. It starts March 27th, which is Passover. And then it goes on until when? When's the last?
It says April 4th.
April 4th. Yes. So for that entire period, we won't have class. So yeah, for 2 Saturdays.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'm debating when I should make the due date for the next draft now. Maybe I give you a little bit more time, which I'm sure everyone would love. Instead of a week, maybe 2 weeks. Yeah, you know what? That's what I'm gonna do. So April 4th, 11:59 p.m. The next draft of this essay will be due. How's that sound? So 2 weeks, which I
Sounds
think,
amazing. Thank you.
yeah, which I think you can do. I think that works, right? The only thing is, though, the first draft of the next essay after that would be due the 17th. That would give you another 2 weeks to write the first draft. Yeah, so that works. Yeah, that works. Right. Anyway, if I change my mind, of course, I'll let everyone know. But any more questions? Any more questions?
Yes,
Yes.
what is our next essay on? Did you go over that?
No,
No, okay.
because right now, it's gonna be either I'm debating this and we'll see how things go. I'm leaning towards you expanding this first essay to like a 10-page essay, or you write a whole new essay that would also be 10 pages. But I feel like that's too much work, which is why I'm leaning towards the prior, if that makes any sense. But we'll get to it when the time comes. Any other questions? Hello? No one?
So when you say expand, we would use the same first 5 to 7 pages and just add 3 new pages, or is that what you're trying to say?
Correct. Yeah. Does that make sense? I mean, listen, if you hate this first essay and you'd rather write about, I don't know, Catherine Layton's is laughing it off and rape culture, then I would be open, I would certainly allow that. You don't have to be limited within the confines of your first essay. But if you want to expand that first essay and write a longer essay, then that's perfectly suitable. Does that make sense? Yes or no?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I just want to make sure everything makes sense, Anyone else? Oh, okay. Somebody said that they received notes for someone else's paper instead of my own. All right, sorry about that. Okay. Um, anyway, I mean, I have office hours. You could, let me know if you want to see me for an office hour, of course, or email me. Again, email me anytime. Yeah, so send me your first drafts, please, for participate in discussion boards, please. I only had like 4 people participate this week, which is inexcusable, to be honest. It's like showing up for 4 of your classes. No, it's like yeah, like showing up, not showing up for class at all. It's I mean, that's the opportunity for you guys to actually write besides writing your essays. So participate in discussion boards, submit me your essays. In fact, if you're somebody who hasn't submitted a draft yet, I will email you telling you, hey, submit me your essay. I don't care how bad it is, just give me something at this point. And yeah, look out for comments for me during the week. If no one has any more questions, I think we can stop the video here, stop the chat here. We've gone on for a long time. Good discussion today, and I'll catch you in a couple of weeks from now. And good luck with the second draft of your essay. All right.
Have a good one, Professor.
Thank you. You too. Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
But you would observe today?
Yep.
Okay. And when she gonna get back to you, 3 hours or tomorrow?